even just won a national award. I won a bronze medal 2010 Nature Book of the Year. So it's
Nature Book. Now, what's that mean?
Nature Book. Well, it is partly about the beauty of nature and how it was restored here. I don't know if you remember that Tahoe was essentially raped and left for dead at the end of the 1800s. And one of the stories I tell in here is John Muir's failed battle to create a Tahoe National Park. So everything that we see out there, all that beauty that Captain Ron was just talking about, that's all second growth forest. That's the rescue of the lake. And that's part of the story of what goes on beneath the surface there.
Why is it that so much of that book, so much of what I've heard is about the Sinatra era, that period in Lake Tahoe? People talk about that aspect of the book. Because it goes, what, from like the Ice Age to
Ice
present?
Age to Marilyn Monroe is what I say. So we got Ice Age mummies and we got Marilyn Monroe. Well, one reason is that I think that's one of the most amazing chapters for local folks, because I think part of what I did was to aggregate so many of the legends and so many of the facts. Lots was written about Sinatra, lots was written about Ava Gardner, lots was written about Marilyn Monroe, but I was able to pull it together into one place, and that's something I did with every chapter. So when I say beneath the surface, I think I'm proud of being able to surprise not just people who are new to the lake, but also folks like you who have been here all your lives, and that makes a big difference to me too.
I know that you spent quite a bit of time up here in Lake Tahoe doing the ski bum thing. God bless you.
Mm-hmm. Garbage man, dishwasher, ditch digger, the whole bit.
Tell me, powder skier.
Powder skier,
Okay.
taught skiing, taught climbing. It got a little more glamorous past that. Played my guitar, anything and everything to stay out of graduate school.
To write a book so inclusive of so much of a range of Lake Tahoe, you must have done a tremendous amount of research. What were some of the items or things that you found out in your research that were not true, that we talk about in Lake Tahoe as being like, this is a fact? Because we do. People that live in Tahoe, I mean, if you say it, if we say it on TV, it makes it true. At least that's what we think.
Well, I start out with the legend, which unfortunately turns out to be false, that Jacques Cousteau dove down in the early days of scuba and found all these floating corpses down there. That's actually my opening story, but that's just a myth in itself. Tahoe Tessie, unless you got a cell phone picture, I don't have one yet. Things like that. But on the flip side, some of the stuff that did turn out to be true is equally astonishing. In 1997, within the wider Tahoe watershed down towards Pyramid Lake, which is where Tahoe's water goes to, we discovered that the human remains that had been recovered down there were 10,000 years old. And that means in the wider Tahoe region, we have 10,000 years of human history to talk about that. I mean, that's back to woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers roaming around in Nevada.
Wow.
And then, you roll the tape all the way forward through Mark Twain, through John Muir, through John Steinbeck, through Bertrand Russell, through Frank Sinatra and Marilyn and Jack Kennedy and what Frank called the Jack Pack up there on the North Shore in Calneva. There's just dozens and dozens of stories. And the central thesis of this book is that Tahoe was the lake that changed America. And I guess that's where I feel my book, there are many, many fine books about Tahoe history. The difference in my book is that I look at it from a national perspective, and my argument over and over again is that Tahoe changed these major authors, changed these major political figures, changed these major pop star and Hollywood figures forever, and then they went out and changed the world.
So I know that you're going around Tahoe, around the area, doing, I guess, book signings, talking to people.
Big book tour, and today, for example, I'm going to be giving a talk about Steinbeck and Muir and Bertrand Russell at the Fallen Leaf Lake store. That'll be at 7:15 tonight. Out there, that's way out at the far end of Fallen Leaf Lake. Tomorrow I'll be at Explore Tahoe in the morning at 10 o'clock, and then I'll be at the new Van Sickle Bi-State Park, which is up above the casinos, in the afternoon at 1:30, giving a talk about Fremont and what is that line doing in the middle of what is that borderline doing in the middle of our lake?
Tell me why there's Coast Guard on our lake. That's the part I don't get.
Well, partly because we got more than one state involved, and partly because this is the largest body of water west of the Mississippi. A lot of people don't know that either. You could take the 10 largest reservoirs in the western United States, Lake Powell, Lake Mead. You can throw them into Tahoe. You have room for the Empire State Building.
Is that right? No kidding,
Absolutely, absolutely. It is the largest body of water west of the Mississippi.
Is that mostly because of its depth?
Yes, it is. Because, obviously the Great Salt Lake is a larger sheet of water on the top, but the thing's only 20 feet deep. You can see further down into the water in Tahoe than the Great Salt Lake is deep. So you keep piling those on down to the incredible depth of 1,645 feet, and you get a heck of a lot of water, 39 trillion gallons. And that is part of what's beneath the surface, too, is fighting over that water. As we say out here in the West, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. And that has a lot to do with the history of the lake as well.
What's your favorite part of Lake Tahoe, your favorite spot in Lake Tahoe?
My personal favorite? Yeah. Actually, to be perfectly honest, it's where I'm going to be talking tonight, which is the far end of Fallen Leaf Lake. partly because it's kind of an old Tahoe feel. You know, that's a dead-end road. It's a tiny little road. It takes a little while to wiggle your way out there on the one lane, right? But it also turns out to be the epicenter of three major movements. John Muir essentially founded the American conservation movement coming out of Fallen Leaf Lake, and I tell that story, and I'll tell it tonight. John Steinbeck lived out there and at Cascade Lake, and that's where he wrote his first novel. And the reason you haven't heard of it, by the way, is it's a pirate novel, and even by his own estimation, it sucks. So it was a catastrophe, but it was where he learned how to write, and he dropped out of Stanford to go up there and be a writer. He forced himself to write his first novel, and it did launch his career. And then Bertrand Russell, who was the most famous and controversial British philosopher of the 20th century, was there in 1940 in the middle of World War II when everybody thought England was going under. He's 70 years old, and by his own account, I didn't make this one up, he sits naked in a cabin at Fallen Leaf Lake and relaunches his career at age 70. And he goes on, he's got 25 years
Why
left
naked?
in the tank. He was a naturist, what they called naturist, all of his life, and that's part of why he was controversial. Yeah, why naked?
Yeah, he's inside the cabin. He won't be naked. Get outside.
Come on,
you know?
especially at 70. What's going on? But, you know, he was that kind of guy. He was the most controversial philosopher for all of his life in Europe, and that was just part of his style. But the point is that he went on from there to become the founder of the anti-nuclear movement, and so he relaunched his career at age 70 from Fallen Leaf Lake. So you've got John Muir, John Steinbeck, and Bertrand Russell coming out of that same space. It's an amazing epicenter for the history of the 20th century, and who would know, right? Because it also happens to be one of the most beautiful spots in America.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book. I've heard nothing but good things. Tile Beneath the Surface by Scott Lankford. There's the book right there. Pick it up in bookstores or go out to Fallen Leaf this evening, 7:30.
7:30, and let me mention some of the stores you can get at because I've got great.
We got to
support
run to a
from the-
commercial break.
Okay, well,
It's
that's
in the
okay.
book, man. This
Oh
is
my-
a
oh my
live
gosh.
TV show. It's
All right,
totally different.
Check out Tile Beneath the Surface on my Facebook page. That's where you'll find all the info.
Scott Lankford, good having you on the show.
All right, thank you very much.
We'll be right back.
This segment is brought to you by Masters of Magic.